A list of the topics, themes, and subject matter featured in this episode have been included in the video description. Even with the fun I had making the funny little fan edits I've done on my channel before, making the Jacob Wysocki effect was something different. It was something more personal, something significantly more time-consuming, and something that meant a lot to me to do. And in my mind, and I truly believe this, I thought if even just 100 people watched this thing and they got something out of it, 1 or 2 comments came in saying, hey, great job, I would feel legitimately happy with that. But it didn't stop at 100 views. By the end of day 4, it had become the most successful YouTube project I'd ever worked on. And as of now, our view count is well on its way to 120,000. More than every other video I have made on this channel put together, or damn near close to it. So to that, I have 2 things to say. 1, thank you. Thank you everyone who watched it. And 2, well, let's try doing this again, shall we? This is the Lou Wilson effect. Welcome to the video, everybody. Hope you're all having a great time. I'm trying out a little bit of like a mood lighting thing. My in-laws got me these cool LED lights for Christmas. And my wonderful wife got me both of these amazing t-shirts, so I'm showing them all off today. When the Jacob Wysocki effect came out, I had a lot of debate within myself on who to cover next. Lou Wilson was a person that I could make a great video on, but I admittedly had my concerns about getting it right, mainly in terms of discussing race. Lou Wilson is a performer that goes out of his way to make his performances loud, proud, and black. And to ignore the impact that him being black has on his characters, I feel like would be a disservice to the video. Not only in the sense that he makes loud and proud black characters that talk about blackness either textually or subtextually in a lot of his characters, but also just look at the way Lou Wilson reacts to whenever that same representation is shown back to him on screen.
Boom! You guys land back where you are. Arthur Eggfort appears on the battlefield.
Oh shit!
Oh shit!
He's back, bitch!
He's back, bitch. He appears, you see, he goes,
Is Arthur Eggfort black?
yeah!
Hell yes.
So if Lou Wilson is going to portray it as so important to have positive black representation in both Hollywood and in tabletop, it makes sense that at some point in this video, we're going to talk about why that's important in the first place. So the format in this video is going to be a little bit different. We're going to look at Lou Wilson, the person, Lou Wilson, the performer, and also look at Lou Wilson as the tabletop player. One of the other reasons that the format of this has to change is that in the Jacob Wysocki video, we only had 1, maybe 2 different characters of Jacob Wysocki in Dimension 20 to talk about. Lou has 8, so we have our work cut out for us. You know, it's funny, when I started the Jacob Wysocki effect, it was only supposed to be about a 15-20 minute video. And it ended up being almost an hour. Now it's Lou Wilson, and I was thinking, 60, maybe 80 minutes. Now I'm worried we're gonna break 2 hours. And I cannot let that happen. I'm also very excited for a special interview that is going to be intertwined within the video today, giving further context and perspective to some of these issues. Joining us here today is going to be comic book legend Arvell Jones. He was a very successful artist in the Bronze Age of comics, working for both Marvel and DC, and with the creation of his character Misty Knight, holds the distinction of being the creator of the world's first African-American female superhero. And also his creative group that he grew up with in Detroit, working together on various comics and making their way through the industry, including Jenny Isabella, the co-creator of Iron Fist. And even with the existence of Marvel rivals, I will do my best not to hold that against her. Backline support killing piece of shit! And also Jim Starlin, who is the original creator of Thanos. So with that said, the only place to start is with the big question. Lou Wilson was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and after graduating Boston College, joined the Upright Citizens Brigade, a Los Angeles-based improv and sketch comedy group that, similar to how I talked about SNL in the last video, has a reputation and legacy for all-star alumni, in their case specifically, Dropout cast members.
Coach? Yeah, coach? Man, it looks like somebody killed this jock.
In terms of introduction, Jacob Wysocki and Lou Wilson kind of went in mirrored directions. While Jacob started on Dropout as a performer, and then recently found his way into the Dome, Lou Wilson was in the Dome from day one, and then moved into Dropout content after that. His first larger role was on Tweenfest, a comedy show produced by Funny or Die for the streaming network Go90. Go90, have I heard of them before? Let me go look into them quick. And they've been canceled. He had an appearance on Comedy Bang Bang, and is also a minor recurring role in Netflix's American Vandal, a criminally underrated show that ironically functions as sort of a parody and critique of the true crime genre, both further complicated by the fact that other Netflix shows like Making a Murderer are part of the same lexicon that helped build up the exact subsect of true crime fame that this series looks to critique. And no, I'm sorry, we do not have time to go on a big side tangent. We have to save room for those for later. He co-founded the storytelling tabletop group Worlds Beyond Number, became a writer for Jimmy Kimmel in 2020, and in 2022, with the retirement of Dickie Barrett, became the official announcer for Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Look at you all dressed up. I've never seen Lou in anything other than a t-shirt. Lou, is there anything you'd like to announce to the announcer?
I'm thrilled to be the new announcer.
All right.
But if we roll back the clock to 2018, we see that Dimension 20 instantly becomes a huge hit, and then before we know it, Lou Wilson was a mainstay of Dropout TV. But before we go in and talk about Lou Wilson at the table, let's talk about Lou Wilson in a different game. A game where the rules change every week. A real game changer, if you will. All right. Sam, play me out. I think that it makes sense to do Lou Wilson right after Jacob Wysocki, as they are a good duo to compare and contrast. For starters, Lou is also a bigger guy, but he carries himself with a much different energy. While Jacob is far more laid back and relaxed when not playing a character, Lou seems to survive in a state of either at the ready or already gone. Lou has a pool of energy and power that he releases like a faucet. He doesn't always go 100 all of the time, but when he does, he makes you wonder how anyone at Dropout can keep up with his energy.
Players, you have 1 hour to escape the green room.
I just found some cards.
Okay, I found 3 in here. Baba Booey!
As we talked about with Jacob, comedy is a lot about subverting expectations. Lou's normal state is being extremely welcoming. He has a kind voice, beautiful smile, and just comes off as the kind of guy you just want to hang out with and have a good time. But with that as his default, it gives him so much room to play with when you just are waiting for him to finally explode.
I'm gonna kill you.
No, that's not exactly fair,
Exactly, dude.
What the fuck is that?
That's not okay, man.
I'm fucking done. Everyone behind these cameras is fucking over. If you're in a hole dying, I won't be there.
I'll help you.
And it's not just the intensity that Lou gets to when he goes from 0 to 100, it's the speed in which he does it. To be able to adjust to a prompt, to be able to adjust to something going on with that quick of intensity. And the fact that it's not always just angered intensity or rage, but a multitude of different emotions where he uses volume or intensity as his main tool, but the actual outcome is completely and totally different.
Where's my lunch money, huh? You little squid. Go back to the ocean, you little squid. You're not gonna give me anything but your lunch money, squid, or I'm gonna put you down the toilet so that you get a little bit of that water that you love so much.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, and I will break yours!
Stay in your bloody drown!
When are we
we gonna learn about dinosaurs?
What Game Changer gives to Lou Wilson is an opportunity to be vulnerable. Obviously, you're not going to get his most nuanced and complicated performances on Game Changer or Make Some Noise, but it allows us to see a bit more of him. And I think what also makes it amazing is that from that vulnerability, it allows us to relate to him on deeper levels. When I talked about Jacob Wysocki in the last video, one of the quotes that a lot of people say they really liked was the idea that watching him be happy makes you happy. With Lou Wilson, it's in how I see him as an inspirational character, and so many other people do as well. If I was to make that quote for Lou Wilson, it probably would be, if Lou Wilson is willing to try everything, it makes me feel like I can do anything.
Lou, Sam says do something cringe.
I've always wanted to do a cartwheel. I think breakdancing is super cool. And I always had a dream when I was in high school that I would lose a bunch of weight over the summer and learn how to break dance. And so I'm gonna try and do one earnestly.
Cool.
I'm not looking at the camera because I'm a little uncomfortable.
Shit.
Oh no.
I'm gonna try one more time.
Well, I guess I put off this part of the video as long as I could. And now we've come to the part of the video I never really knew how to make. I have written this and rewritten this and rewritten this so many times, and so what I've decided to do is I'm just going to do this off the cuff, and then located in the description below, you will find a more detailed written version of kind of my approach to this whole thing. But it's important with Lou Wilson that if we're going to talk about the amazingness that is the safe space that Dropout has created and the opportunities that it gives performers of all walks of life to be vulnerable and to do amazing things, and talk about the fact that Lou Wilson is this proud performer who wants to be a proud Black voice in tabletop and in Hollywood, it's also important to talk about why that representation is needed so badly, and talk about what life is like, or has been like, outside of that safe space. So what I've done is I've made a segment here talking a very, very abridged version of the histories of Blackness as portrayed in Hollywood and in tabletop gaming. And I understand I'm going into this as an outsider, a well-meaning and self-proclaimed ally, but an outsider nonetheless. For that reason, I've reached out to a lot of different sources, both academic and entertainment-based, in the Black community and the Dropout community to kind of help me place these things together. Because the best way I can put this, if there is one thing you take away from this segment of the video, it's this quote. I hope that I am not the first intellectual voice that you've heard on the subject of race, and I beg you for me not to be your last. And I understand also that sometimes allyship can really backfire on you. To give an example of my own life, back when I was in college, I used to be a stand-up comic, and the only open mic they had performing at the college was run by the Black Student Union. And it's important to notice for the context of the story that at the time, the president of the Black Student Union was white. I don't know the backstory of the politics behind this, but what I will say, it wasn't for a lack of Black people that went to my college. One of the performances I remember particularly was a hauntingly beautiful rendition of the song Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday. The president came up after the song, and then right before he gave this big speech about how he thought that this organization was such a great asset and was proud to help provide this opportunity for both Black and non-Black performers to be able to stand on a stage together and get to know each other and share their art and all that, he turned the song into a sex joke. And while I don't remember his wording exactly, it was something to the effect of saying that he wanted to wrap his hands around that strange fruit. There's really not a safe way or a comfortable way that I can say this. But for those of you guys who have not heard the song before, the strange fruit referred to in that song is not about what swings from the trees. It's about who swings. And while I don't think anything I'm going to talk about today is going to be on that level of stakes of potentially messing things up, I go into this as cautiously as I can. So with all that being said, we need to go back. A long way back. Like about 120 years back. There's an anecdote that someone brought up to me a few years ago that always stuck with me. A white man asks a black man why you never see black people in time travel stories. The black man answers simply, because there's nowhere for people like me to go back to.
Twin hornets. I had the very same one when I was their age. Seeing white picket fences and perfect family houses, it's enough to make one nostalgic.
Or nauseated.
Oh, come on, Miss Lance. Even someone as jaded as yourself can't deny how idyllic this time was.
Yeah. If you're white.
And a man. And straight. And...
Okay, I got the point.
There are no true heroes when it comes to black representation's origins in Hollywood. For one very clear reason. Black representation started without black people. One of the largest precursors to American cinema were minstrel shows, theatrical shows mostly consisting of white actors wearing black paint covering their faces and using white and red accents to give themselves the appearance of both figurative and literal black clowns. It is a practice most commonly referred to today as blackface.
You Camp Town ladies sing this song. You Camp Town racetrack 5 miles long.
And things did not get any better when we switched over to film. In 1915, D.W. Meredith would create what is widely believed to be the first ever feature-length film, Birth of a Nation, a 3-hour epic showing the failure and chaos of the North's victory in the Civil War. But have no fear, our Southern heroes have railed together to form an epic force of justice to save the day, the Ku Klux Klan. Fun fact, when I originally recorded this, it took me several takes because every time I kept trying to say epic force, I kept saying evil force. So, how's that for a Freudian slip for you? After that, we did see things slowly get better. Lincoln Theodore Monroe, known more by his stage name Stepin Fetchit, was the first major black actor in America, the first to get a major movie credit, and the first black millionaire. While historically, Monroe has gained more renown over the years, in his day, many of his black peers accused him of furthering stereotypes and basically performing blackface without the paint. In 1939, Gone with the Wind was released and became so popular, it's still the most successful film of all time, depending on your choice of metric. Hattie McDaniel became the first black woman in history to receive an Academy Award. After giving her historic speech, she was promptly escorted off of the main floor and back to the balcony. The main stage floor was whites only. In 1967, Sidney Poitier starred in the historically controversial film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, following a white woman bringing home her new fiancé, a black man, to meet her parents in San Francisco. At the time of its release, interracial marriage would still be illegal for another 3 years nationwide. In 2005, they remade the film as a race-reversed wacky rom-com with Bernie Mac and Ashton Kutcher. It was, it's not very good.
Did you tell them?
Tell them what?
That I'm white.
You're white? Stop the car! It was a joke. I was kidding.
Until he faced the ultimate challenge.
Hey, my man. Percy Jones. Oh, pleased to meet you. Man, I like that solid grip.
Dad, this is Simon.
That's a boyfriend name, ain't it?
Yeah.
In August 1963, Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. In stark contrast, in January of that same year, Alabama Governor George Wallace gave a speech with a very different message.
That is in us, and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
There's a not insignificant number of people alive today when those speeches were given. My own grandparents were alive when those speeches were given. So when people say to just leave the past in the past and that it was just a different time back then, in terms of people, in terms of the people affected, it hasn't been that long. The question I had written down here was, how do you think that black representation in media has changed either when you were growing up or when you started working in the industry compared to now?
Well, when I was growing up, there was none. To be absolutely frank about it, what was represented was pretty much demeaning to black people.
Absolutely.
A little bit on the shameful side. And, we all, thought deeply about the characters that we were exposed to. And on the superficial level, we enjoyed everything. But characters like, Amos and Andy, Rochester, the savages that Tarzan had to face.
Yeah.
And, all of those, kept reinforcing the message that, our people, were subpar, and because there were a lot of stereotypes at the time. And those stereotypes, bruised egos and crushed spirits, which is maybe why it was done like that. But because racism was very prominent back then. And I didn't understand it.
And if you think that the worst of this stuff is behind us or has been long behind us, why don't we just pick out one example here for a second? Let's just talk about the subject of blackface for a second. Most of the blackface I've shown you so far in this video obviously couldn't have been from before Birth of a Nation, right? Look at the film quality of the blackface sections I've shown you so far in this video. Restoration can do a lot, but this footage was obviously recorded after Birth of a Nation, right? Most of these were from decades afterwards, from those being nostalgic for the good old days of blackface and minstrelsy.
I come down with my hat caved in. I go back home with a pocket full of tin.
And Glenn, when you talk about old-time show business, there's one phase of it that you just cannot overlook.
And that is?
That is the minstrel days.
Boy, weren't those good old minstrel shows wonderful?
Oh, I should say they were. Performers like that great monologist, Lou Dockstader, would come out on stage and Lou would have a smudge of black on him right up there.
Yeah, and George Primrose had one right down here.
That's right, and oh gosh, there were a host of others. Names and fellas like Honey Boy Evans and Bert Williams.
Yeah, and Eddie Leonard and Al Jolson.
Oh man, you're talking about the tops there.
Even The Jazz Singer, the first feature film to have spoken dialogue in one of the most important movies in the history of cinema, shows superstar performer Al Jolson performing with the aesthetics of minstrelsy, blackface and all. And if we want to look at some non-American examples here for a second, I'm going to show you the show from Great Britain that I honestly could not believe my eyes when I saw this. I'm going to show you what it is, when it aired, how long it aired for, and know that for the majority of its run, this was considered a primetime staple of British television.
see. It's very clear to see
that a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
The medicine go down, medicine go down.
Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down
in the most delightful way.
If there was ever evidence of how much I thought it was important to include this context, that if Lou Wilson is going to make so much of his creative output about the importance of representation and positive representation, that I discuss why that is so important. That evidence would be how difficult it has been for me to make this segment of the video. I hate this. I hate watching so many of these disgusting, horrible clips full of hate and racism and just vile pieces of art, if you can call it that in some of these cases. And I say that as a white guy. I say that as a person who isn't personally affected by these depictions. But it also makes me think, because I'm a very empathetic person, if it hurts me this much to look at this, if it makes me physically ill to watch this stuff over and over again, then what must it be like for the people this is targeted at? For those who are told that this is what they are, over and over again. And the farther into all of this I got, the worse it got. I know everyone has their problematic faves, but the older they are, the worse stuff you're gonna find.
Mr. Bones, why does the fireman wear red suspenders?
Well, our tape is in a lockdown. I don't know. You say, how come a fireman wear red suspenders?
Well, the reason the fireman wears red suspenders keep his pants up. I don't know. I'm shining and my heart I'm lining. Come and meet me in the moonlight.
Okay. In Shirley Temple's defense, at least, I can say she was a child. And a pretty young one at that. As for in Judy Garland's case,
Tell the town they ought to come on down and join that blackout over Broadway. No time to stop. Spread your wings, you all. And start to black up for that blackout over Broadway.
oh my gosh, what am I doing? Look, I don't want to stereotype my own audience here, but the Venn diagram of Dropout fans and friends of Dorothy is practically a circle, right? And I mean, this has been kind of a complicated issue for myself, too. Like, I never knew if I, in fact, was a friend of Dorothy. You know, over the years, I figured I was probably at least an acquaintance of Dorothy. I've been curious if I was, in fact, a friend of Dorothy. And it's taken me a very long time to realize that maybe, in fact, yeah. Me and Dorothy are, in fact, friends. And if you'd like to hear me talk more about that, you can hear it talked about in an upcoming video essay of mine, How Dungeons and Drag Queens Awoken Something in Me. Yes, that is the real title of the video. That is going to be a real fun time. Fun fact, that is also why the lighting is set up the way that it is.
This is a whole style of video now, and by style, I mean one person did it first and then a bunch of boring people ripped her off. Stealing from lots of places is inspiration, but stealing from one place is plagiarism, unless you call it the bread tube style, and then it's fine.
Just trying to create a bit of a moody, bisexual lighting atmosphere for myself. A little shout out to all of my film school queers out there. Wait, am I allowed to say that? I think I'm allowed to say that. Please hold. Honey, am I allowed to say that? Look, just bear with me here. I'm new to this, okay?
Do you ever wonder why we're always, like, wearing gloves?
I mean, I can tell you, but you're not gonna like the answer.
Before you die, you can make one last wish.
Yeah? Well, let's see now. I wish, I wish I wasn't Dixie. Hooray, hooray! Oh, the Camptown ladies sing this song. Do-da, do-da. The Camptown racetrack run along. Fantastic, isn't it?
Many stamps today. Give kitties. We'll be blessed if we all invest in the USA. Sammy! My Uncle Sammy!
Here comes the freedom man.
Can't make tomorrow's plan.
Not unless you buy a share of freedom today.
And I mean, that's just American animation. If we talk about anime for a second, there's the kind of blackface character from episode 3 of Cowboy Bebop, the whole Pokemon Jinx thing that has been discussed and debated to hell, and no discussion of this would be complete without talking about him.
With your nice long human legs and normal colored skin.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say normal. That's got a lot of uncomfortable implications.
You know, speaking of, have you met Mr. Popo?
Hi.
Oh my God! Are you allowed?
There is going to be people out there who watch this video and think that I talked about this subject for way too long. And yet, I still feel like, in my heart, struggling, that I feel like I have barely scratched the surface of how bad a lot of this is, and how important a lot of this is, because we sure as hell know that people aren't getting educated about it anymore. And you're going to have your people who are going to say, hey man, I don't understand, why does all this have to be about race? This is why. This is why.
You know, with being a black creator, and, you know, while working at Marvel in DC, wasn't, you know, it was partially the assignments, because I wasn't in control of the assignments that I was given. And I created several characters that never saw the light of day, that ended up sitting on the shelf. But at Marvel, they were very much open to hearing what I wanted to do. It just, for whatever reason, it never went too far.
And that covers that angle of it. But, I mean, this video isn't just about Hollywood, right? It's about tabletop gaming. And I mean, come on, it's not like tabletop gaming has a weird and twisted history of racism behind it, right? 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 1974, under the name of TSR, Gary Gygax would release the first edition of what we know today as Dungeons & Dragons. Among the various race groups introduced into the game, one of the most controversial was the Drow, a society of underground-dwelling elves with pitch-black skin, portrayed as naturally and unambiguously evil, and deeply associated with torture, deception, and slavery. Years later, you would see a lot of different examples of the Drow being portrayed more as gray, or more as purple, or dark blue. And unfortunately, a lot of you already know where this is going. D&D's most prolific and racist loophole.
I am Brutalitas, the magician. Magic user, baby, what?
So we just gonna ignore that hate crime, huh?
I'm a dark elf or a drow.
We also have the reintroduction of Spelljammer, an older supplement in which they reintroduced a race of space monkey people that they decided to add a bunch of flavor text to, illustrating that this race of space monkey people were often targets of slavers and contained a higher than average pain tolerance. Also in 2022, a new incarnation of TSR tries to remake an older property with the blessings of Ernie Gygax, Gary's oldest son, who, to briefly sum it up, believes that D&D has gone too far into the deeps of inclusion and wokeness. The game is called Star Frontiers New Genesis, and is co-created by Dave Johnson, a man described by many as a neo-Confederate, which is its own rabbit hole I do not have the bandwidth to dive into right now. And if we look at Star Frontiers, putting aside for a second that in the rules themselves, they basically discourage or completely outlaw the introduction of gay and trans characters, We have a wide variety of humanoid races to choose from. We find 2 examples that stand out above all others. The Nordic race, which is a race of blue-eyed, blonde-haired super warriors, meant to be, in lore, genetically superior to all other races that come their way. And their counterpart, a race known as the... I don't want to say it, but let's just say it's the one that rhymes with Nemo. This other race is inferior to almost every other race, and is described as having a default lower intelligence, in particular in comparison to the Nordic. Fuck this. Fuck TSR. I don't know if that's going to stay in the video, but for now, fuck TSR. So once again, what I'm trying to illustrate when it comes to the importance of understanding these issues and being on the same page, as far as what Lew Wilson is talking about with his characters, whether it be with Hollywood over 120 years ago, or with Dungeons & Dragons 50 years ago. In the course of the people it involves, it really wasn't that long ago, and it's still important to understand and to talk about. But with all that said, we've gotten through the rough part of the video. So with our history lesson put behind us, it's time for us to go to class. Of course, that doesn't really make any sense, because wouldn't we want to be in class for the history lesson? Fantasy High! We're talking about Fantasy High!
And we see out on a little sort of clay patio. Lou, would you describe yourself for the other players?
Oh, of course. Hello. I'm Fabian Seacaster. You know, I'm a half-elf. I'm, of course, the son of the famous William Seacaster, the great adventurer who sailed the Celestine Sea, freeing slaves and raising up nations. I'm 6'1", white hair, a relative, like a thinner, like a very, how would you say it?
Lean, athletic.
Lean muscle. That's what I said. Very lean muscle, very dexterous, but also incredibly strong.
So for his Dimension 20 debut, Lew Wilson introduced us to Fabian Seacaster, a pompous and pretentious jock who, despite his many talents, quickly learns that he's not going to get far in life if he doesn't learn to both respect and rely on others. His father is a famous pirate sea captain, piracy being yet another place in history where, yes, there were significantly more black people than people like to admit. And also a lot more gay people, but that's a video for another day. You start to notice a few repeated themes throughout Lew Wilson's characters. And one trend you start to notice with Lew's characters is repeating themes of adolescence and masculinity. Being a high school jock, it's pretty obvious here, but it gets more subtle in some of his later characters. What I find interesting about Fabian is that he's a character that Lew already knows needs to grow. He's a character that's anything but self-aware. On the outside, Fabian sees himself as the coolest kid around, but in reality, it's easy to see him as a spoiled rich kid who thinks he's just better than everybody else.
He sets you up, you survey the field, and you see a bunch of people that you could pass to. But all the people that you could pass to are kind of like losers that you just fucking like either clotheslined or like rope-a-doped or moved around.
Of course.
Depending on what part of the show you watch, you also see Fabian dealing with pretentiousness, occasionally dabbling into privilege. While Fabian coming from money often has him coming off more as a comedic jerk rather than a problematic figure, the third season in particular goes a long way to show that money can't buy you friends, or family, or identity. And those are the things that he grows to love the most. I mentioned before how Lew portrays different styles of power. In this case, it definitely takes the form of his self-confidence. For better or for worse, Fabian is a character who thinks he can do anything. Keyword being thinks. Lew, as the player, knows that learning from failure is part of Fabian's arc, and luckily, the dice give him plenty of opportunities to cement that lesson, even into the third season.
Okay, you give me a DC 15 acrobatics to successfully land on your moving motorcycle.
I have a plus 13 to acrobatics, so just don't roll so bad.
God damn.
Is that a nat one?
It was a nat fucking one.
Why do you still own this die?
Okay. So you pop the side window on a natural 1. You spring forward and miss the motorcycle. A kid, like a teenager, has jumped to a motorcycle with 5 feet of clearance from a van doing 90 in the middle of the desert.
This is why there are more women than men. Because teenage boys do this shit.
So the idea of learning to fail covers adolescence, but what about masculinity? Well, even from episode 1, Fabian is different from your typical jock stereotype. Sure, we know he's strong and athletic, but he's not exactly the burly meathead you might expect him to be.
For real, dude? I've never heard somebody that plays Blood Rush talk like you. You're using all kind of words that are just like...
Well, I mean, I'm one of a kind.
You see, Rog says, yeah, I bet you are one of a kind. One of a kind of a bad person.
What a witty bomb. That's good stuff.
So in the end, it ends up coming off a little bit less Friday Night Lights and a little bit more Glee. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, there's plenty wrong with Glee looking back, but that is once again a video for another day. You see this divergence more and more as the show goes on, as Fabian starts taking dance classes, incorporating ribbon work in his fighting repertoire, and kills toxic masculinity.
I'm sorry we got into it like that. Where we come from, toxic masculinity is dead because I killed it. By deciding to dance instead of do sports, or do sports and dance.
He's really working on himself and his aggression.
But I guess here, toxic masculinity is still a thing, so I'm sorry that I succumbed to it.
When in Rome.
When in Rome, yes.
Look at Fabian's character art between seasons 1 and season 3, and you can see how this change is reflected. Seeing him as a character who started trying to show us how traditionally tough he was, at every moment, which makes it interesting at the end, when at his absolute strongest, it's when he's embracing his feminine side.
Luke, could you describe Kingston Brown for us?
Of course. Hello, my name is Kingston Brown. I work at St. Owens. I'm about 6'2". I wear my grandfather's black trench coat, generally over either my nursing scrubs or like a white t-shirt. I'm New York born and bred. I've been here since 1963 when I was born. I've almost never left. I love it here, the city. These are my people. This is my space. I take care of it. I am a steward of New York City. I will be here until I die.
So Kingston Brown is a great look at Lou Wilson's character choices, as he's one of Lou's most grounded characters. Not only in terms of his character, but in terms of the setting. Kingston stands out as his usual chaos energy is replaced with a incredibly calm, nurturing nature. While race and masculinity seem to be our 2 primary themes, if there was a third theme, it would be family. While not every character, a large number of Lou's characters are prominently featured as either sons or fathers within the context of the narrative. That being said, why would I choose to bring that up here? Well, while Kingston may not have children of his own, many people take the perspective that in many ways, the unsleeping city itself is his child. So much of Kingston's identity is tied to a sense of community. Even as far back as character creation, Cleric of the City domain spells it out quite literally. So many people that I talked to who didn't have fathers growing up found a kinship with Kingston, reminding them of figures in their own life that prove that you don't need to be blood to be a parental figure. You see the way he's adopted the magical community, become its protector, and even sacrificing much of himself in that endeavor. While I cannot speak to the Black experience personally, to oversimplify an extremely complicated issue, community is often born from a sense of necessity, of protection, of survival. When a group of people can't count on outsiders to take care of them or to have their back, they learn to take care of each other.
I modeled Misty after my girlfriend at the time and my mother. My mother was a hero to me. She was a registered nurse who worked midnights in Detroit.
Right.
And she carried a 38 pistol with hollow points. I asked her, I said, how's this being a medical professional and you're carrying a deadly gun? And she said, well, as a nurse, I know where to shoot them and I know how to fix them up. But I have to protect myself.
Yeah. I mean, this is like one of the number one thing I tell people to do interviews is just like, is having that influence, just like let them talk, because then you will get some like amazing gold that way. The day we first met, like way back at Grand Rapids Comic Con 1, I also did an interview with the late great Alan Bellman, and just I don't know what happened. I still have recording of this interview. I don't know what question led him to this point, but at some point he started drifting off, and he started telling the story about how like a kid that he grew up with, like when he was like not kid, but like they were like 20 at the time, that he just got like kidnapped by the mob. Something just absolutely nuts. And I'm like, I'm not cutting him off. Okay, this is last minute editing Ken here. I didn't want to speak ill of the dead, but I thought this was an interesting story, so I wanted to include it. But thought it would be worth, looking into it, making sure I fact-checked it. It turns out the story is a little bit different than what I remembered off the cuff in the Arvell Jones interview. And the real story, I promise I'm going to make this short, but oh my God. All right, we're going to try to rapid fire through this. Alan Bellman was the last living man who worked as an artist on the original run of Captain America, dating all the way back to issue 15, doing backgrounds in 1942. And I got the opportunity 11 years ago to interview him at what was at the time a small-time, one-day Comic-Con. Without prompting, Alan Bellman started talking about how he worked for famous Golden Age comic artist Bob Wood. Bob Wood was known as the pioneer of the noir/crime comics genre and co-creator of a comic series with an infamously ironic name, Crime Doesn't Pay. Bob Wood had a severe gambling and alcohol problem, and shortly after his comic was canceled, allegedly murdered a prostitute in a hotel.
He had a history of drinking, and one day I was walking the pavement and I saw the headline on the old New York Journal American: cartoonist kills woman in tryst. Is that the right word, tryst?
I believe so. The cab driver who called him in said that Bob Wood told him to his face, "Yes, I killed a woman who was giving me a bad time in room 31 of the Irving Hotel. Why don't you call someone at a newspaper and make yourself a few dollars?" Bob Wood's pants were allegedly so soaked in blood, they had to borrow pants from the hotel in order to get him down to the station for questioning. Bob Wood served about 3 years in prison for first-degree voluntary manslaughter and violating parole. 3 years after his release, he was randomly struck by a car and killed. Or was he?
They say he took an order as a short order cook in a diner in New Jersey, and then, from what I understand, the mob took him out.
So, to review, according to Alan Bellman, the legendary comic artist, giving an interview to a 22-year-old stranger working for a small-town Comic-Con, unprompted, claimed that he was reliably told that the quote-unquote car accident that killed a legendary comic artist/murderer was actually a hit from the mob. You may be thinking to yourself, "Hey, Ken, why do you add that story?" And to that, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question. How could I not add that story? He's a character who I find so sympathetic, as he gives so much to a fight that shouldn't be a fight in the first place. And it sure as hell shouldn't be his fight. You also see this in his profession as portrayed in other media. How often do you see shows about doctors or nurses whose very job is to help people and take care of people? And so often they do a terrible job of taking care of themselves, or develop a sort of messiah complex, where in order to save and help other people, they become completely self-destructive.
You can't blame yourself for her death. This wasn't your fault.
That's the point! I did everything right. She died anyway. Why the hell do you think that would make me feel any better?
Kingston Brown is a fascinating character to me, because on one hand, He's a departure from a lot of Lou's usual themes. But in other ways, he's a culmination of them. It is what I would define as by far his most different of his characters, but in that contrast, makes his aesthetics and his overall oeuvre of work shine even brighter.
Just the golden light of the bulb coming in through the windows. We see alone a tall figure. Lou, would you please describe your character?
Yeah, I'm King Amethar Rocks. I am, big, tall, 7 foot, like pop rock candy man. I'm a Storm Herald barbarian. Level 3. I've got a, this is all so much just jumbles of information. I've got a green pop rock candy beard and all of the, in my opinion, unnecessary accoutrements of the King of Candia, which I am for some reason.
I'm going to throw it out up front. King Amethar is probably my favorite of Lou's characters. So let's start with the design of his character, as this brings up a point that is integral to understand when it comes to black representation, and why it's important to actually have people of a minority group involved when it comes to representation. Have you ever played a video game and looked at the character creation options and noticed that the farther you get away from male white characters, the weirder things sometimes can get? One of the biggest reasons for that is that there's a lot of shortcuts usually taken when it takes to creating diverse characters. Oftentimes people only settle for having pigment sliders where they're physically changing skin tone, but often not including anything but the most straight Caucasian Anglo-Saxon features. Take for an example from a different medium, this famous SNL sketch of Eddie Murphy. As a social experiment, he puts on quote-unquote whiteface and tries to see life through the eyes of a white man. We clearly recognize him because we know what Eddie Murphy looks like, but there's still a certain uncanny valley to it as well. Now, to be absolutely clear, there's any number of reasons why a particular character may or may not have any variety of facial features or hairstyles, etc. It's more to my point that the options themselves are lacking, and it is notable and consistent where those options are coming from. And this brings us to a bit of a more complicated subject when it comes to racial representation, the idea of race coding, or in this case, black coding.
Being a black character, or even a character of another race, other than, the majority race.
Yeah, that's fair.
A lot of that it's like, character voodoo almost. How can I put this? It's like jazz. It's like, as it's coming together, getting the right vibe, the right jazz, the right, feeling.
Right.
Is based on a creator's own experiences, and how a creator kind of pulls it together. If it's manufactured too much, it comes off phony. If it's too intellectual, it comes off that way. And if it comes off too formulated, it does. It comes off fake and formula. Too much of it has to be about who they are and how they lived. When you're getting away from mainstream sets a certain set of boundaries, and then people have to be able to accept that. So what are those considerations? The only consideration there is that it rings true.
In this case, even if you take Lou out of it entirely, you can look at Amethar's character and immediately see the character as black-coded. And while we're here, here's another quirk of black character design that a lot of people miss. Who can tell me what is wrong with this picture? One of the most common mistakes artists and animators make in the design of black characters is the change in pigment on the inside of hands. And the reason this representation I think is so interesting is because of the fact that it's so simple. It's around you everywhere you go. I'm guilty of this. I look at my own hand, and I assume that that's what it looks like. That is what the inside of a hand looks like. But that's not the same for everybody. So when you make that mistake with somebody, it gives off the impression that you either don't know, and if you don't know, it's common enough, it's because you're either not paying attention or because you don't care. And I say that so brutally because I can admit, as a comic artist, that I have made this mistake myself before, and I do not plan on making it again. Okay. Well, if we're bringing up my comic, then I guess I have to talk about the masked killer elephant in the room. All right. Rewind the tape and roll the title card. Stop. Oh my goodness, for the love of Squeam, stop. We are not running with that title joke. There is no way that's not getting taken out of context. Editing Ken, I'm watching you. You better take that out. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this as honestly and clearly as we can. Roll it again. So if you watched the Jacob Wysocki video, you know that I am the writer of a comedic horror comic series named Corpse Core. If you didn't see that video, I'll roll that clip here. Here's the time code if you want to skip ahead. My very first comic was a self-aware horror series called Corpse Core. A world where every horror movie in the world is not only a real murder, but hidden cameras capture the entire affair and sell them back as blockbuster movies to the same crop of unsuspecting teenagers. If I was to give my usual convention pitch, usually I say something to the effect of, it's like if Kevin Smith directed Scream. One of the main hooks of the story is that it's told from the perspective of Jack, the killer of the series. You see him get hired into the company, getting his first big assignment, and even pick out a rather bizarre persona for himself. The Swing Time Slasher, an over-the-top, fast-talking showman with an orange and purple pinstriped zoot suit. A character that, I must admit, while I didn't know of Dropout at the time, really gives off a lot of Samurai-ish energy.
And your host, me. I've been here the whole time.
Now, the reason I bring this up is because one of the most defining jokes is the fact that every issue of the book either is or will be named after a different horror movie cliche or horror movie rule. Very much going off the idea of, like I said in the video, the whole Kevin Smith Scream thing. And some of you already know where I'm going with this. This whole joke immediately put me in a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I had the option of either embracing it and trying to find a way to make this joke the right way, or option 2, I spend the rest of my career having every single person asking me why I didn't make an issue named after that. I decided it was better to take the challenge and trust myself I was going to find a way to make this work. And that's how we got this. Corpse Corp, issue number 2. The black guy always dies first. Shout out to my former roommate Scott, whom Jared, the black guy in question, was named after. Here you see him breaking the fourth wall, tearing himself off the cover of the comic, telling me to go fuck myself. This is one of my favorite jokes I've ever written. So when researching this trope for the book, and reaching out the best I could to either black friends, fans, or content creators, I realized I had misunderstood this trope. For a lot of them, the trope in question is often actually referred to as first or worst. When you actually break it down, and yes, I did legitimate research on this topic back in the day, there are far less horror movies with black first deaths than you would think. There is, however, patterns you easily see where racism makes its way into horror movies. Black people and other minorities are more likely to die in horror movies, but it's because of the fact that they have significantly less lines and bigger roles than their white counterparts. They are also significantly more likely to have more gruesome or vivid death scenes, usually due to, on some subconscious level, being seen as less empathetic or disposable to white audiences. Jared reveals that he's been in on the whole conspiracy of Corpse Square the entire time, intends to kill the Swingtime Slasher, and destroy the entire company of Corpse Corps to eliminate this stupid stereotype once and for all, while also making kind of a sly joke about how Alien vs. Predator is debatably the only mainstream horror movie that actually has a black final girl. While I did think that this original version was funny, I thought I could make it better. And so I took the feedback I was given and took another crack at it. The final version shows the Swingtime Slasher with the actually approach, but slowly segueing into discussing the destructive nature of this trope, alongside similarly unfortunate tropes, like the all too common bury your gays trope, covering the painfully common occurrence of gay romances ending in tragedy for the sake of shock value, alongside the less common but still accurate trope, Vasquez always dies, where if a franchise dares to have not one, but two badass ladies hanging around, the stronger, less feminine one will always be the one that dies, despite being better equipped to survive the situation. The anti-last girl trope, if you will. Now, one interesting thing about this trope is I've also heard some people refer to it as Rodriguez always dies, because as you can tell from the name Vasquez, this trope is often attributed to women of color, more specifically Hispanic women, but some people also call it that because this trope very frequently specifically targets Michelle Rodriguez. So for me, I felt that this whole process left me, in the end, with a better joke. Not only does it address and lampoon the trope itself, but it educates people not only about the harmful nature of the trope, but others like it. On top of that, the joke works on a second level, because it's hilarious to have the scene set up in a way where, as this character is being introduced, that the most socially conscious character in the entire scene is the fucking serial killer. Now, I assure you, I did not go on this giant side tangent just so I could promote my book. Although you can read it for $1 at patreon.com/deadmaninc. I can't wink. The reason I did bring it up is because it absolutely screams the point that I have been trying to make here. This is why diverse voices are important. Why it's important to understand and take feedback from different perspectives. I truly feel the art I created is better because I took the time to incorporate black perspectives and input, just like I took input on this video. It's why I have spent so long screaming from the rooftops how important it is to have black representation and understand why that is needed. So with that, I'll leave this rant like this. Earlier in this video, I said that if you took one thing away from this video, it would be this quote. I would like to make one amendment to that quote. If there is a second thing you take away from this video, let it be this. It is not the job of a minority group to educate you. However, if they choose to educate you, you better as hell be listening. Moving on to Amethar Rocks as a character, it should be to the surprise of nobody that playing a barbarian is where we really see the explosiveness of his persona take effect. In a way, it almost feels like foreshadowing in character design. While D&D is never scripted per se, it's not uncommon to have a pretty strong idea of the general direction in which you're going, knowing that this season was going to be the most hardcore and serious Dimension 20 had been so far. You can see his personality and class choice as part of that same goal. This also continues a trend of loose characters that balance confident strength with braggadocious precocious fanciness. Amethar is a jovial, nonchalant character who doesn't seem to take things too seriously.
According to the report, the princesses managed to get to scarecrows, stuff them with sugar grass, dress them in their clothes, and hoodwink Chancellor Le Pen and disappear during their visits.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What, and he just didn't notice?
He was apparently 90 minutes into the lesson.
Oh, well, who's so smart now? Yeah, you show him, Jet. Oh, come on, Ruby. Oh, hell yes.
Lou is going into a game where he knows that things are very likely going to get very serious, forcing him to get more serious. If he also knows that a serious and hardcore game means it's much more likely for bad things to happen, then stripping away his swagger and falling into rage as a way to cope seems like a natural evolution, one that I'd imagine, at least to some extent, Lou either saw coming or quickly adapted to.
I slammed payment day into the carriage. Nobody likes where we are, which means we need to be together. The space we are in is not of our choosing. The people we are with is. Stop fighting. Start listening. Then I pass out.
You just fucking sleep.
It's also impossible to talk about Amethar without talking about how he handles the theme of fatherhood. A lot of Lou's characters deal with this idea of failure, but what makes things with Amethar so interesting is that so many of his stakes are external. Sure, Amethar is often put into danger, but either as a proud soldier thrusted into royalty, or as a father struggling to protect his family from the dangerous unknown. Amethar's greatest fear is that in that failure, it's the ones around him that suffer.
Get out of here.
Get out. Dad. Was I supposed to hold my action?
You don't have to die to save your daughters. Grab Ruby and jump out the window.
If you die, I will only end up getting myself killed to avenge you.
I'm gonna grab Ruby and throw her out the window. Can I make a perception check?
Yes.
Do they need time to get away? I think for a second. And then I jump out the window.
Amazing. We cut to the reactor core of the ship. And who do we find there?
You find Gunthriol, Miggles, Rashback, aka Gunnie. I'm 4'11", about early 30s, beautiful black bald head, and a gorgeous cyborg body. Full cyborg from the neck down. Currently absolutely like busy with plugging things in, trying to get power wherever it needs to go, checking it out. Did you guys say something about a shark?
Gunnie is probably one of Lou's more passive characters, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Much like the wider world of Starstruck, Gunnie shows that capitalism is in fact the bad guy, with many of Lou's characters finding themselves getting a form of comeuppance or knocked down a peg for overconfidence. Gunnie stands out from being put in this horrible position, almost absent from his own decision making.
Sign here.
Okay.
And he says, oh, we offer, by the way, Spacer Guild has an insurance. They take a percentage of whatever you make on the trip. So they're gonna carve out probably 10% of your haul. Better you do a flat rate after the trip to pass clearance, and then they don't get a percentage, because if you strike it big on a haul like this, then you don't want the insurance company to come in and carve out. So what we recommend you do is fly uninsured.
Okay.
And then you come in afterwards and you pay the flat rate after the trip.
So knowing that, so that's what spacers don't do insurance? We're not doing that.
Well, it's up to you. You're the egghead kid, so why don't you run the math for me? It's a 1 in a million that something bad happens, and it's a 100% chance that the insurance company takes 10% of your haul.
I mean, well, I'm a true spacer, so no thank you, insurance.
Your intestines are floating in space.
Gunnie is exploited and absolutely financially abused to no end, to no fault of his own, and nearly all of his mischievous and delinquent behaviors take place as a form of survival rather than a place of evil. While Anarch Era is a world that gives off the impression that everything is in fact fucking rigged, it's hard not to look at Gunnie having it worse off than many of his other crewmates. Gunnie is defined intentionally by his victimhood. In many ways, Gunnie is just along for the ride, doing what he has to, and only really rocking the boat if it helps out his current situation. This is far less out of selfishness, but necessity. Gunnie's quest in the main game is often doing whatever he has to do to make things work and make it to the next day, trying to roll that ball uphill. But Sisyphistic endeavors are just that. And I think that there's two different ways you can look at this. On one hand, I think that anybody who's been a victim of the capitalist machine, or had bad debt, or struggled to get by, and perhaps sometimes done some things they're not proud of, in one way or another, can relate to Gunnie. On the other hand, while it is somewhat debatable how much he says it in the text rather than the subtext, it's definitely true that one cannot put race aside when it comes to discussions of the exploitative nature of capitalism.
Headed towards the south side, where Whitney Jammer. Where would this owl find you at like 3 p.m.?
Oh, bro, you know I'm on the field. It's probably in the gym. It's probably basketball practice. So, you know, we're out here running drills. Whitney plays point guard for the team. Whit is probably out here like just doing like practicing passing drills and, just basketball shit.
That's all of them.
General basketball shit.
So it seemed like the logical choice to me to kind of give a bit of a compare and contrast to Fabian Seacaster and Whitney Jammer, both which are high school athletes, both presenting different angles and perspectives of the common jock stereotype. Because they are very similar in some ways, but also extremely different. One example off the bat is, unlike Fabian, who took more of a fancy, pretentious route of things, Whitney does have a bit more of that macho, bro-y energy in comparison to Fabian. But what I like about his portrayal is that while he does have that vibe, he never really gets into bullying territory. You hear a lot of people talking about how one of their favorite aspects of the show is the friendship between Whitney Jammer and Evan Kelp. Man, you really have to swallow that when you say it, right? Kelp. Ugh. You get used to it eventually, I guess. But it's also worth exploring the idea that in the normal world, if stereotypes are something to be believed, Whitney Jammer would likely be the kind of person shoving Evan into a locker.
Also, it feels like everyone looks down on Cameron, and I feel like the four of us could flip this house and turn it into just an absolute house with killers. Like, we could take that goat and made it badass.
Yeah, I think so. Mess with the goat, get the horns.
Oh, yes. I'm about that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty cool with Goat House now. If only because of that. Because we get to say that. I'm gonna scream that at people.
I mean, assuming he could fit in the locker, but that's a different problem. And when it comes to Whitney Jammer talking about race, a lot of that we see in the discussion of muggles. Oh, great. So sorry. Namps.
Namp is the better word?
That's my thought as well. Yeah, we're all on the same page. Yeah.
I know, right? It just, something feels off. There's a lot of moments that for either Jammer or Sam, that being black is yet another fish out of water layer that they have to contend with. And I can't be the only one that's also noticed that the way that he embraces the term muggle and the tone in which he says it in, it gives off a certain training day energy. If you know, you know. It's also noticeable that while Jammer is not racially alone at Galpenny, he is still in a very culturally outnumbered position.
I was told at one point, when I was showing my samples that and discussing story angles, that as a black person, I couldn't relate. I was told that. And
Yikes.
And I was also in the beginning showing samples, and people were saying, well, my characters look too much like me, even though they were supposed to be white characters. They're going to be colored white. And, I'd slip a couple of brothers in there when I could, or sisters in there when I could.
Well, I obviously wasn't the person involved in this kind of phenomenon. I am familiar with it to a certain extent. Without giving away too many personal details, I grew up in a small country town in Michigan. In our entire graduating class, we had exactly, drumroll please, one black guy. Real nice guy, for what it was worth. Fellow nerd, just like me, really loved Star Wars. That was one thing I remembered about him in particular. And that he really loved stormtroopers more than almost any other character. So, true story about that. When the trailer for The Force Awakens first came out, and this is that giant shot in the sand, and then Finn pops out in the stormtrooper uniform, my first thought when I saw it, after not talking to the man for several years, was still, oh man, Tyler's gonna love this! And this part is also a bit subjective, and I don't exactly know how to word this. But I feel like this may be Lou's least relatable character to me, and I mean that as a massive compliment. Whether it be some of the jokes or references or aspects of his demeanor, I watched this character feeling that there were just aspects of Jammer that I might just be too white and nerdy to get. I really like Jammer as a character, and I love looking at him as a counterpoint to him and Fabian Seacaster, as Lou takes two very different approaches to what are, on the surface at least, very similar characters.
And beside you, your darling cousin.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself.
There stands Lord Squak Airavis, Earl of Peckersburg. If you want to go ahead and track this and throw a nice little picture of my bird next to me, it'll be the secretary bird. Like whip thin, truly like 105 pounds, wet, yet 6 feet tall, like dark, deep black, high boots into trousers, kind of almost like an ombre lightening up, kind of gray into white, wearing a kind of rich green waistcoat into, is it called a cravat? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I think for the occasion, wearing a cravat that is like clouds over ocean, and kind of illusory in that way, of just like a soft white up top with a gentle blue underneath that slightly moves along with the wind, wearing a giant cape of black raven's feathers that kind of extends.
Cousin, we're wearing the same cape.
Well, I thought it would be striking.
You're right, actually.
Exactly. Into just like a very sharp, incredibly sharp features, with kind of around his eyes, just kind of gilded makeup that like comes out and then in and then just kind of all the way around, into hair that is like pulled back and sleek on top and then kind of poofs out in the back into a bunch of like, again, kind of ombreing these like white tendrils that end in black tips. Astride his ostrich chariot pulled by 25 beautiful girls.
If Whitney Jammer was Lou going no fancy all jock, Squak Airavis is the complete opposite direction. From his glorious entrance to the bitter end, you never know exactly what to expect out of Squak, but you can confidently see that it will be anything but boring. One of the most interesting things to dissect about Squak Airavis is the fact that the character works both on its own, but also as a view into a new side of Lou that we've only seen hinted at before. While it always feels appropriate to look at Lou Wilson's characters through the lens of a sports metaphor, this season absolutely conveys Lou Wilson as a team player. Squak enters the campaign alongside his cousin, Lady Chirp Featherfowl, played by Emily Axford, but the two are an inseparable duo of comedy and drama throughout the show, and are an absolute delight. It takes an incredible amount of familiarity and trust to tie your character so closely to another character at the table. But when you can pull it off, it is nothing short of magical. Just in the way that we learned earlier about how Fabian needs to trust in others and to be able to lift each other up, Lou shows that as a player, this is an area where he absolutely thrives. Lou's characters aren't always unwavering yes men to his fellow role players, but one of Lou's greatest strengths as a role player is how he lifts up everyone around him and makes their characters feel better, or helps them with the assist when someone else is going for their big moment. Even in the moments in the game that are truly antagonistic, the way that he plays off that tug of war at play is done in character as to inform everyone at the table that everything is above board and not personal.
Those thoughts are racing through their mind as they're running. She casts a fog cloud to obscure it from everyone.
Amazing!
Counter spell. Nothing will go unseen in this moment.
Incredible.
Lou leans hard into his role as a chaotic enabler. As is fitting to the setting, Squak is by a country mile the most morally questionable of all of Lou's characters. Squak is arrogant, self-obsessed, and above all else, a shameless indulger of his many vices.
We could be married, it would be good.
Would it be a good match for grandfather?
Of course! Oh, for grandfather, of course, but for me, never.
Wait, what?
Never.
So you are engaged and you intend to break it off?
I don't intend to break it off if I can find something that I think fits me a bit more.
Cousin, you're shopping around?
Of course I'm shopping around.
You're price comparing?
Of course I'm price comparing. I would never just buy.
As for the deeper insight here, it's worth mentioning as well that Squak Airavis, to put it bluntly, is with no competition whatsoever Lou Wilson's queerest character. We've touched before on how two of the most common themes or subtextual underpinnings of Lou Wilson's characters are race and masculinity. And while I'm no expert on the intersectionality of these two concepts, I heard from a lot of Lou Wilson fans who felt seen watching him playing a black character that is so proudly flamboyant and so thoroughly embraces the chaotic fey sexual energy of the season. Squak is a lot of things, but traditional is certainly not one of them. I gotta say, what's hilarious to me is that when I started looking for comparative examples for this part of the video and trying to find a character from a movie or a TV show or something like that had what I felt like was the culmination of Squak Airavis' energy, that the movie I came up with, no pun intended, was Nathan Lane in The Birdcage.
Don't use that tone to me. What tone? That sarcastic, contemptuous tone that means you know everything because you're a man and I know nothing because I'm a woman.
You're not a woman.
Oh, you bastard.
While it's difficult to describe what Squak has as far as a character arc necessarily, I think he inherently gives off a similar energy to how people describe a murder hobo. Not in the sense of that he wants to go off murdering people, but in the sense that he pretends not to care about things or people so that he can lie and cheat and philander without any remorse. Towards the end of the story, when he becomes more engaged with his fellow party members, you see him start to change his ways and change the way that he uses his powers of deception and seduction. Not for evil, but for good. Squak is right up there for favorite character for me. Ultimately, it's a question of bringing the right character to the right tone in the right setting. Squak is a character that showed off a lot of range in a way that I'm sure a lot of people weren't expecting. I don't know if we're ever going to get to visit the Bloom again, but let me tell you, I would give anything to spend more time with Squak Airavis.
And the other figure? The other hand on the glass is one of wood, which then connects to the body of a little marionette puppet boy wearing a tiny little orange shirt, green shorts with a painted on eyes and a little mouth. Yet only the difference is on his face, where there would be normally a little wooden nose. Instead, there is a splintered kind of gap where his nose has been removed. Touching glasses. Indeed, Lord Bandelbridge. When we reach Schuberg, us three friends, we will treat you as you have treated us.
So you would think that the Archfey Birdman would be as weird as we get. And yet here we are. Going along with Never After's theme of putting the grim in grim fairy tales, Lou plays a less pure-hearted version of Pinocchio. He's broken off his nose entirely in order to avoid his natural lie detector, and has gone deep into the business of schemes, scams, and bamboozles. Playing opposite again of his traditionally masculine characters, his Pinocchio steers farther into the cartoony fairy tale school of voices, going at least an octave higher than we have ever seen from him before. As for his commitment to blackness,
Hey, boys! Look what I got here!
Hey, where are the white women at?
Because it always sucks when a performer gives you a nat 20 and you're like, that was amazing, let's roll 7. And you're like, we all know that wasn't a 7.
The problem is there's also the reverse, because I was also like, well, what if I make Brennan honor my nat 20, which is just Pinocchio, the door opening, me holding Pip, knowing I have a nat 20, and then just going, where are the white women at? And making you...
I don't look at it that I don't have to comment.
Pinocchio finally finds where the white women are at, and you don't want me to say anything about it? You want to silence me?
Wow. You're problematic. You're problematic.
You're problematic.
No one wants Pinocchio to find where white women are at more than me, okay?
Gone.
You're introduced full throttle into the troublesome trickster, and Lou leans hard into his antics, both in moments going hard for and against his character's well-being. However, watching Lou as this character shows him absolutely taking advantage and hamming up as much as he can the giant luck swing he's built for himself, as a character that is very much on top of the world or falling fast as he can. Now, this is where things started to turn for me. I've watched Lou Wilson long enough to know that while this has been funny and exhilarating and adventurous, that there's likely something deeper going on here, right? So I kept watching. I kept listening. And everything changed when I heard this speech.
I think Pinocchio seeks to understand because he wants to know why his life has been so hard, why it needed to be this hard, why everything has always been as hard as it was, why nothing has ever worked out. Why do other children get to lie and steal and still live good lives? And why does any time I choose to do those things, I get hung or my feet get burned or my father gets eaten by, it's like every time I fail or have a misstep, I suffer the ultimate consequences, and that doesn't happen to other kids. And I want to know why. What was the goal? Why did I have to suffer?
As far back as Fabian Seacaster, Lou Wilson has explored what it means to be black, what it means to be a man, and also the intersectionality of those two things. So it took me by surprise when, during the weird Twisted Fantasy season, where he's playing Pinocchio, the little wooden boy, with his super high, squeaky, Mickey Mouse-like voice, that he took those concepts and made them uncomfortably and unavoidably real. And for an example, to put that into context, allow me a bit of a brief detour here. One of my favorite things I love to do is watch adaptations of books with my wife, whether they be movies or television shows, because I love the conversations we have while watching them, talking about the things that have stayed the same and the things they've chosen to change. One of those shows was Little Fires Everywhere, an extremely well-acted show that takes a very nuanced look at privilege in the various forms that it can take. When I think of Pinocchio screaming out, trying to understand his double standards, I think of this scene.
She really doesn't leave a baby alone in the cold in front of a fire station.
You didn't make good choices. You had good choices. Options that being rich and white and entitled gave you.
I still haven't read the book, but it surprised me when my wife told me that Kerry Washington's character was not originally black. Watching the show now, and what they did with it, I cannot see it any other way. It is an unfortunate and terrible aspect of humanity itself, that we are built psychologically to other people. That naturally, unless we take the efforts needed to fight it, and we should fight it, that we will always other people the farther they are from ourselves. Racism is easy to denounce when you're talking about minstrel shows and blackface and horrible depictions from decades ago. It's easy for people to ignore that and pretend that it's not something that happens anymore. And even if it did stop, and that was all gone, that doesn't change the stuff that's still happening every day. The stuff that Pinocchio is talking about. The ways that we will so quickly dismiss and refuse to empathize with people that look different than us. When you look at the way he talks about his experiences in this speech, it's easy to look at his speech and draw horrifying parallels. It's easy to draw parallels to figures like Emmett Till, who, due to false accusations, this literal child was killed and lynched. When you make a speech like this, with that subtext, with that intent, you don't accidentally use a word like hung. You say it because you mean it. You say it because it means something. Now, that being said, I would never claim that Lou Wilson's Pinocchio is all dread and despair all the time, or that Pinocchio is this level of serious and introspective all of the time. In fact, it's intentionally exactly the opposite. Lou shows a clear understanding of the genre structure and the source material. While yes, a big aspect of Never After is playing around with how messed up some of these fairy tales were in the first place. It's also a clear example of how Brennan or Abria, alongside all of their players, make their deep dives more approachable. It's a lot easier and more digestible to dive into deeper character introspection and more complicated themes when it's placed in the wrappings of, say, a grim fairy tale, or a magical high school, or an enchanted New York City, or Futurama's worst possible timeline, or a very different magical high school, or a food pun-themed medieval fantasy world, or a fae-fueled Regency drama. It's foundations of familiarity that we build upon to reach our greatest heights. Without that, it's incredibly easy to scare people off or overwhelm people before they have a chance to get invested in the first place. Look no further for a masterclass on how to do this than BoJack Horseman, a show that, yes, contains more anthro-based animal puns and visual gags than any show you will ever watch in your life, but it's because of the fact that when the show welcomes you in with the puns and the silly animals and the gags and the brilliance that is Paul F. Tompkins, that you are able to handle the show, when slowly but surely BoJack Horseman turns into one of the darkest introspections into the human psyche I've ever seen. And in the broader strokes of things, that's what storytelling is. It's that balance. It's that light and darkness in contrast. You can't be sunshine and rainbows all the time, and you can't be grim, dark, and horrible all the time. It is in your darkest moments that you see the light come through in your brightest, and vice versa. It is that ray of sunshine an otherwise cloudy day. It's this feeling of excitement when darkness encloses all around you. It's that spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine. Okay, considering the context of this video, I probably need to come up with a better metaphor than that. Wow. You're on a roll now, Ken. You've already ruined Judy Garland for people. Why don't you come for Mary Poppins while you're at it? Pinocchio shines as a character because of that intense contrast, and is purposely ironic namesake. Pinocchio is Lou Wilson's biggest liar, not just in the sense of him telling fibs all the time, but in the canyon of difference between what Pinocchio tells us his character is about, to what Lou Wilson shows us his character is about. Who is Pinocchio? Is he the happy-go-lucky, high-pitched trickster who fumbles and stumbles his way into mayhem and adventure everywhere he goes? Is he the dark and tragic boy left to his own devices, never given a chance in the world, and forced to throw away his feelings and morality in order to survive, in dealing with the consequences of issues far beyond both his understanding, his fault, and ability to handle in many cases? He's both of these things. And he's neither. And he's also something else entirely. And that's what makes this character so great. If I'm being completely honest with you, that framing device of not quite getting Pinocchio until I got to that speech was not a lie. When making this video, I was dreading getting to Pinocchio because I felt he was the character that I understood the least. Now that I get it, all I can say is, good job, Lou. While I'm always probably going to say that Squak Airavis or Amethar Rocks are my favorite of Lou's characters, I would have to say that I think Pinocchio might be his best.
if you wouldn't mind, Lou, describing your character.
Of course. Sitting there is Thane Katzon. He's has a face right on the edge of boyhood before manhood, 19 years old, a rich pastrami pink with a with a kind of close cut, rich brown, almost blackened edge hair. He wears kind of plain clothes, not so much in contrast to the traditional furs of some of those around him that also hide chain metal that he wears that also they most likely do not. Peeking out from those clothes, though, are his extremities, which are colored that of a rich marbled rye bread, as he is of both Meatland and Ceresian parentage.
In some ways, Thane Katzon feels like going back to basics, but very much in a good way. From his original description, the idea of young adulthood and coming of age is very much at the forefront of his characterization. It's fitting that Ravening War is a prequel to A Crown of Candy, as in many ways, Katzon borrows elements from what you would imagine a younger Amethar to be like. We see glimpses of Matt's take on a younger Amethar in the show, but he's still much later on in his life as a soldier than Katzon. This is our final character, and once again, we see our familiar themes working their way into the character. Thane carries a lot of personal baggage trying to portray and show his masculinity and prove himself as a man. On the other side of that coin, however, Thane doesn't seem to really realize what masculinity means in a world entrenched in conquest and warfare, and even less so what one would look like when that's taken away.
You seem well.
As do you. Strong.
I've been... time in the Meatlands makes one quite powerful. There's not much to do but train and travel and train and travel and train again.
Of course.
So much of the world of Calorum is defined under the guise of indoctrination. In many ways, Calorum can be to religion what Starstruck is to capitalism, but more so it is a world defined by general zealotry and indoctrination more than it is a critique of any specific religious belief. The effects of this indoctrination are further cemented by the time jump of the show, where you see a very clear before and after of Thane Katzon, for better and for worse. There is a sense of dread I get from Thane Katzon that I don't get from other characters. Sure, Kingston Brown is quick to sacrifice so much of himself for the sake of other people, but he's confident in his beliefs, and it is true that regardless of what it ends up doing to him and what it costs him, good does come from it. Sure, Gunnie may be constantly exploited by the rigged system in front of him, but because he knows what he's getting into, it allows him to try to rig the game in his own favor when he gets the chance. Even Pinocchio, as abused and taken advantage of as he is, his knowledge that he's in a bad situation helps him to advocate for himself and make the best of it. What makes Thane so tragic is the fact that he does all of these things, goes for those giant leaps and bounds of sacrifice, giving away pieces of himself time and time again, thinking that he's doing the right thing, thinking that he is the one making these decisions, when more often than not, someone else is pulling the strings and he has no idea.
I'm curious. In the time that you've been there, it seems dangerous for me to journey. What, is it safe? What would be the political state between the clans right now?
I mean, my mother, with my guidance, has made great strides to the tumult and violence that led me to leave there in the first place.
And you are one of the minds unifying these thoughts, yes?
One might say the architect. I mean, it's, of course, my mother who is the voice of the beef clan.
But she is but a mouthpiece and a piece of meat. You You are the mind behind this. When it's a safe and welcoming for a Sarisian senator of my esteem and experience to come visit, maybe you can show me one of these Bulbian rises across the Midlands, and she leans in real close to your ear. Maybe, finally, perhaps, slam it down a big style.
Good night, everybody.
Nailed it.
No way. No way.
No way, dude.
Ow, it hurts.
If Pinocchio is defined by his disobedience, Thane is defined by his blind loyalty. He's a character defined by goals and the sometimes horrific lengths he's willing to go to in pursuit of those goals. He's constantly seeking out validation and instead finding exploitation. Thane just wants to be a great soldier, make his mother proud, make the Meatlands proud, prove himself worthy in the eyes of the FDA. Thane is oblivious, pushing through every possible barrier in his way, sacrificing so much of himself and those around him, only to realize how much he's been used when it's far, far too late. Thane Katzon is Lou's one and only truly tragic character. He's not a character who gets to overcome the trials put in front of him. He loses a game he never knew he was even playing. So as I close out Thane Katzon, I have to show this clip. You likely already know the one I'm talking about. But I want to preempt this clip a little bit, because I think what makes this clip so special is it shows how masterfully he balances his comedy with tragedy. It's this sense that he is so invested in his character that it's difficult for his fellow teammates to play along with. And the laughter that comes from them in a way that I don't think is toxic, but is uncomfortable. When push comes to shove, and Thane is left at his absolute lowest, betrayed to the bitter end, his response is not indignation or anger or rage, but sorrow. I didn't know that you could scream sorrow, that you could show the rage of sorrow. But he does it. And it's as impactful and absolutely cinematic as it is harrowing to watch.
You lied. You lied to me. You told me if I united the Meatlands, that you would be there, that you would come.
I did not lie. It was Basha that united them.
I saved myself.
Oh!
This guy's a virgin?
I wanted to be slammed down big style as the bulb rose. You lied! You lied! I lied to my kin, betrayed my mother for you!
More than any other character I've talked about today, Thane Katzon shows the power of the trust between a talented player and a great dungeon master. One of the hardest things to do in D&D, no matter how skilled you are, is to let go of control. To know that sometimes your character's fate just lies with either the dungeon master or the dice. And that can be difficult to do sometimes. But the way that Lou Wilson and Matt Mercer feed off of each other, collaborate and build off of each other, is the solid foundation on which Lou creates Thane D'Alessandro Katzon. It makes sense to take more of a comprehensive approach to look at Thane, considering he is the last character. But I think it also fits with the way that Lou plays him. One by one, you can see all the elements that we have built from every single topic we've talked about so far in this video. Adolescence, masculinity, family, social exploitation, channeling of chaotic energy, balancing of comedy and drama, and the art of separating character and player knowledge on both a mental and emotional level. Admittedly, the only big topic that we don't really have a lot to chew on with Thane Katzon is the subject of race. I mean, there is some stuff you can pull from, the idea that there are some lines here and there that touch on the fact that his Saresian parentage does give in to some discussions of either mixed race upbringing or colorism, and also going off of the various militaristic themes in the show, there's definitely conversations that can be made about black disposability, but at the same point, those same topics could also be brought up as a criticism of the military-industrial complex as a whole, and oh my god, we are so close to the end of this video, we do not have time to open up these kind of worm cans. I promised myself I was gonna get this under 2 hours, and I will not break that promise. What I'm trying to say here is that it's not one particular thing that Lou does as this character that makes it amazing, but it's all of the things. It's the fact that he takes the best elements that he has learned from his experience, years in the making at this point, of playing tabletop games in front of an audience with cameras and the whole shebang. And he shows the growth. He's shown how he is, to pardon the pun here, leveled up in order to deliver the amazing performance that is Thane D'Alessandro Katzon. So that brings us to our final question, rounding this whole thing up. What is the Lou Wilson effect? Well, I have a few answers, actually, because that answer changed quite a few times, not only over the course of making this video, but in editing and putting it together. You see, at first, in my first version of the script, I always felt like the ending was kind of phoned in, kind of going off the same vibe as I had from the last video, where yeah, the Lou Wilson effect is showing how, despite how you're discriminated against and how bad a representation can be for your particular group, that they find a way to take advantage of where other people shortchange you and push through all that in your own unique way, carve out your own journey, make your own path forward. And yeah, that's motherfucking Lou Wilson. But that didn't feel right to me. I felt there was something bigger going on here. And so when I stepped back and I started thinking in one word how I would sum up my feelings about making this project and what the Lou Wilson effect is, surprisingly the word that came to mind was vindication. I've been a media critic for a long time, whether it be for Saturday morning cartoons or Batman or, in this case, Dungeons and Dragons. And one theme that has always stayed consistent through all of that is a subconscious need to prove myself. To prove to people that just because something is just made for kids, or just because it's just this silly game that you play with your nerdy ass friends in your basement as you throw some dice around and make some silly voices, that can be about something more. That it can be something more. And in all my days, I have never found anybody who is better at showing that than Lou Wilson. Comedy is hard. Improv is hard. Drama is hard. And making true, entertaining social commentary can be almost impossible. But the ability to do all of those things at the same time, to be able to make something that means so much to so many people, that they not only laugh and sometimes cry, but they learn from it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you come out of watching Lou Wilson and the stuff that he creates better than you were when you went into it. That is the Lou Wilson effect.